Hello and welcome to Kitchen Table Talks. My name is Toni Austin Allen and I am here with Dr. Roy Austin, author of Definitions for Living, a book dedicated to helping you live more effectively and happily, both personally and in your relationships with others. A number of years ago, Dr. Austin compiled numerous articles which he had written to assist his clients into what is now his book, Definitions for Living, making sense of words and ideas that define our lives. Recently, he and I began sitting at our kitchen table and talking about his book, and we became excited about the possibility of sharing our conversations with others who might benefit from them. The podcast you are about to listen to are the product of the recordings we began making of our conversations. We have discussed the book chapter by chapter and have produced this series of podcasts to accompany the printed version of the book, which is now available as an ebook on various publishing websites. Although we believe you will benefit greatly from the podcasts themselves, you will get the most out of them by purchasing the book, reading each chapter prior to listening to the podcast, and having it available to follow along with our conversations. The ebook is available on Amazon Kindle, Barnes & Noble, Scribe, Booktopia, Apple Books, Layman's, and Adlibris. We hope you enjoy our talks at our kitchen table as much as we have, and that your life will be greatly enriched by having shared our conversations with us. Okay, we're on Chapter 12, Understanding Faith and Trust. Now, we're going to really be digging into the differences between faith and trust in this first half of this chapter. This chapter is quite large, so we've decided to make it into two parts. So this is part A of chapter 12, and we're going to be just focusing on the differences between faith and trust, which I think is interesting because I would expect that most people don't really know, no fault of their own. It's just our language. We probably don't know the ins and outs and the real definitions of faith and trust. But I do know, after talking to you, that this is one of the bigger problems in relationships.
Yes, it is. And it's very important to, in the very beginning of our discussion here, is for us to focus on the word that you used just a moment ago. We're going to be focusing on the differences between faith and trust. And in the first few paragraphs of this chapter, I mentioned that I will be focusing on human trust and faith and in the human relationships, rather than using the concept of faith primarily related to religious faith, even though the concept of faith applies equally to the topic of religion. I'm not going to be focusing on it as religious faith in this particular chapter. And also I note that in religious conversation, the words faith and trust are used very often interchangeably, and as if they were synonymous and that they meant the same thing. And the same is true in human relationships. The words faith and trust are very often assumed to be synonymous and mean the same thing, when in fact they're two very different concepts. And so if the reader and the listener keeps this in mind as we go along, it will be very, very helpful, because the whole focus of this chapter is to understand how each of these different concepts work very differently. And the reason that so many people have difficulty with faith and trust is that they do assume that they mean the same thing, and that scrambles the brain. It messes up our thinking and it messes up our relationships, as we will find out as we go along.
Yeah, I would expect that most people don't think about faith in a relationship because it is so rightly overused and sometimes misused in a religious setting. But I love the softness it has in a relationship. It's a growing into kind
yes,
of
it is.
process.
And it is a very important part of any relationship that we will talk about in just a few minutes. And that's why I'm separating my discussion into human relationships away from discussion about faith in a religious context, because people often do not know that how important faith is in human relationships.
Well, let's go on and talk about the meanings of faith first, because that really is perfect. That's what needs to come first. And you talk about that there are two types of faith. And if you don't mind me just reading the short version, the first kind of faith is one in which a person chooses to believe that something is true without any evidence to support that belief. And then the second type of faith is the decision to believe that something is possible and to allow people or circumstances the time and opportunity necessary to make it real. And if you could maybe delve into that a little bit deeper in this first one, just to clear up the two definitions, the two kinds of faith that we have.
And it is important to understand that there are two separate meanings of faith, so that when we use it in conversation, we'll know which one we're talking about, and we can help our listener to understand which one we're talking about. One is a very simple but often very difficult decision, and you read the word choice in there, because faith is a choice. We decide to believe something is true without any evidence, and so much of any relationship is based on this kind of faith, is that there's so many things in any interaction with another human being that cannot be proven, and we have to respect and honor the importance of having that kind of faith in relationship, so that we don't try to get someone to prove to us what cannot be proven, and that conversely we don't try to prove something that cannot be proven, such as the basic idea is that if you're in an intimate relationship with someone, the issue of love and caring often comes up as an issue of conflict. And a lot of people want to have their partner prove their love to them, which cannot be done. And this is where a lot of friction happens. So this is one of the very basic examples of faith being necessary in a relationship, because as I used to tell my clients, love cannot be proven, it can only be expressed. Mm-hmm. And so when you try to turn something that requires faith, such as the belief that someone cares about me, into a scientific fact, that's when the relationship gets bogged down. And we can talk about that a little bit later.
Yeah, I'm just imagining things I've heard, like, maybe you're not in a good mood, or you've had a fight and the other person said, see, it's totally unconditional love. You don't really love me. And
Right.
It's like, no, that has nothing to do with this. But that, if there's something that goes wrong, or you don't look lovingly with adoration every minute, then obviously you don't love me. And there's some mixed up thinking in that.
There's a lot of mixed up thinking in that, Tony. again, I used to tell my clients that you have to be really careful about what I used to call love tests. And this is what you're referring to, is that we'll come up with these tests of love. If you really love me, yada, 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 dot, dot, dot. And then they come up with this test, and either they're doing it deliberately in a manipulative fashion, or they're just doing it because that's what they grew up with. And that's what the culture teaches them, is that you're supposed to prove your love to someone. And they don't know that it's a matter of faith. It cannot be proven. And so they get, here again, really bogged down. And so as we go on in the chapter, we'll understand how important faith is in any relationship. This kind of faith is that a lot of stuff just cannot be proven, and you got to believe it. Now, the second kind of faith is the decision to believe that something is possible. Now, this is the beginning of any trust building process. This is where you connect the two different concepts together in a dotted line, is that in order for trust to be earned, one has to give that person an opportunity to earn that trust. And so, like when you're entering into a relationship for the first time, either business or personal, you have to have some kind of a faith that it is possible, and hopefully probable, but certainly possible, that something good could happen here, and that it would be a mutually beneficial relationship, or otherwise the two people would not get into the relationship in the first place unless they had some kind of belief that we'll be able to have a good relationship here. Either both of us will benefit financially and or emotionally from having gotten together. So all trust building relationships begin with the faith that this person could possibly earn my trust, and I could possibly earn the other person's trust, but we have to give each other the opportunity to do that. And this is where this beginning faith base is a part of any relationship as well.
And that's where I see probably a lot of people who have lost trust in humans because of past experiences really struggle with taking that risk, because having faith in something that is possible, maybe, is a big risk to a person who has been hurt a lot, maybe, or has a lot of fear of being hurt again.
Oh, absolutely. And there are cliches that describe this quite well. One of them being once burned, twice shy.
Yes.
You know, and another one is similar to that. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. So that's the idea, is that when you've once been hurt, or many times been hurt in the past, it's very difficult to open yourself up to possibly being hurt again. So that's why when people have had difficult and painful circumstances in their lives, particularly early in childhood, and they've been abused or mistreated or let down or disappointed by someone, it is hard to exercise that faith and give people a chance to earn your trust, because you're opening yourself up to get hurt. So you have to be very patient with people when they have a hard time giving you a chance in a relationship.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's go on over to the characteristics of faith. We've kind of already started that a little bit, but number one is, it segues right into what you were just saying. Faith can help us or hurt us. And you say in the second paragraph and in the first one that it can be very positive, it can have strength, it can be an effective source of strength, encouragement, and overall well-being in our everyday lives. But then there's also harmful characteristics of it as well. Could you give some examples of both?
Absolutely. And as I mentioned in the text there, you can have faith that, like someone cares about you, like I talked about earlier, and that they're going to do nice things for you and add great benefit to your life. And that's and also that they care about you enough to stay with you and to contribute to your life. And you have to have that faith here again to give both of you an opportunity to have a relationship, so it can be very, very helpful. And when someone is hurting and they need comforting, and you can, it's very comforting to believe that someone really cares about you, and when they're hugging you and giving you a chance to grieve in their presence, and you believe that they care about you, that gives you a freedom to grieve and to heal and to develop an intimacy with that person. Whereas if you did not believe that person cared for you, even though they may care for you greatly, but if you believe this person really doesn't care about you, they're just putting on a show and they're just doing this to make themselves look good, then you're not going to be comforted by that person. Because you're interpreting them in that filter of believing that they're not a good person and that they don't care about you. So no matter how much they might really genuinely care about you, you cannot benefit from their loving and their caring. It's just like faith in a supreme being, a God. A lot of people are comforted greatly by their belief that there is a loving, caring God that cares about them, that forgives them, and will be there, quote, for them in times of difficulty. That can be very, very comforting to believe that and give a sense of strength and direction to their lives, even though it cannot be scientifically proven that there is a God and that this is a loving, caring God. When you believe it, it's a great source of strength and comfort. And as long as you don't try to turn it into a scientific fact, it gives you a great deal of a benefit as you live your daily life.
You know, I can see how this would be very problematic with people that we want to respect so much, like a parent, a grandparent. And everything in our human race our human species tells us that we are to have faith and trust in our parents or guardians or teachers. And if we are not careful, though, and we do not see the signs and continually be hurt by an abusive parent or an abusive guardian or friend, and we continue to have faith, that's when it can be harmful. Is that what you're talking about here?
Yes, that's the flip side of the coin there, that faith can be very, very harmful to you when you believe something that you hope is true and you want to be true, but in fact it is not true. Then you're setting yourself up over and over again to be disappointed and hurt and have the rug pulled out from under you. So that's when faith can be harmful, is when you have unrealistic faith in someone because that's what you want to believe and you refuse to give up that hope and faith, and you get hurt every single time. And also there's another example of when faith can be harmful, and that is when you have very dependent people who want to be taken care of and comforted and encouraged all the time, and how people take care of them and take responsibility for them. And so they will enter a relationship and they'll say, I really believe that this person's responsibility to me is in just that. They're supposed to take care of me. And so they enter that relationship. And so they have this set of beliefs or faiths about what this person should do for them that are unrealistic. And so they set the other person up and themselves up to have a very troubled relationship, because this other person is always, quote, letting me down because they're not doing for me what I want them to do. And so what we believe about how relationships should work can set us up for disappointment and can kill a relationship very easily.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, you say number 2 in these characteristics is that faith is a part of any relationship. It does not require evidence. You say that in the end of the first paragraph. And that's really the difference between trust and faith here. It does not require evidence. And I really like what you say down a little bit further in the second paragraph. It is very easy to prove that you have not been faithful, but it is impossible to prove you have been short of being in his or her presence 24 hours a day, every day, which of course would make this discussion of faith a moot point. Therefore, this is one of those situations in which faith would be absolutely necessary and which evidence should never be demanded or expected. And so we do have faith in every relationship we have. Employer, employee, spouse, friend, the cashier at Family Dollar, there's even with that, you have faith that they're going to open up. You don't really know. You can't be there 24 hours to see if they're going to get that key and open that up, but I've got to drive soon and go there, and
exactly.
And I have faith that it's going to be open, and I don't really know that. And that's a silly little situation, but even down to that, we have to have faith in every relationship, don't we?
Exactly, we do. And here again, so many people want that sense of guarantees that they're not going to be disappointed or hurt, is that they keep trying to get people and the world to prove to them and to guarantee them that they will not have pain and disappointment and suffering. And so they're always angry and frustrated that the world does not cooperate in that area. And in this intimate relationship, such as marriage, for a lot of people, it's a good example here. Faith is certainly required. That, like in the classic example of someone being faithful to their partner sexually, that's a classic example, because, as you indicated earlier in your reading, is that you cannot prove a negative. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people have this idea is that, well, you've got to prove to me that you're going to be faithful to me, and see, they're getting their concepts mixed up there. They're wanting trust when it's not possible to earn trust, because you can't prove that you're not having an affair with someone. You can certainly prove that you are, but if you want to believe that someone is being faithful to you, you have to have faith in them. Mm-hmm. And stop putting them and yourself under pressure of saying, you got to prove to me that not only have you been faithful to me up to now, but you've got to prove to me you're going to continue being faithful in the future, or otherwise I just can't stay in a relationship with you.
And you told me just a little bit before we turned the recorder on that, that empowers the truster And that makes a real lopsided relationship, because the other person then, not understanding this fact that I can't prove this to you, start spinning their wheels to take the trash out every day, to be home on time, to do, you could spin your wheels for the rest of your life trying to prove something that can't be proven.
Yes, that power is in the threat. You've got to prove it to me, what you can't prove. And so that if you do buy into that, if the other person buys into that and takes on the responsibility of trying to prove something they can't prove, then they are going to run around with like a chicken with its head cut off, as the old saying is, trying to prove something, and that gives the other person who is demanding the proof a lot of power of threats and anger and frustration that the other person is always trying to satisfy, and it does create that sense of power within the other person, is that I can jack this person around and try to make them prove to me that they're committed to me, and the other person feels helpless in the relationship because they can't do it.
And what they're really looking for is certainties where certainties are not evident. And you talk about this idea at one point toward the end of this characteristic. You say, few issues place as much pressure on a relationship as when one's partner feels so uncomfortable with faith that he or she insists that every aspect of the relationship be proven. And that would be like saying, prove to me that my life is going to be good from now on. That's just not at all possible. It's not specific. And the idea of certainty is going to make everybody miserable.
Yes, there's a really good book that came out a few years ago called Benefit of the Doubt. It is a religiously based book, but the principle is still the same. And the subtitle of it is The Idolatry of Certainty. And this is where a lot of people tend to have kind of a worship attitude of placing a lot of emphasis on knowing for sure about whatever it is they want to know for sure about. And they cannot live with the anxiety of being uncertain about it. A lot of people, like when they think about having children, they say, well, I'm so afraid that I'm not going to be a good parent and that I'm going to really hurt my child, because I grew up in a home that parenting was not good. Or I think I'm a pretty selfish person, so I may not be a good parent. Or they may say, well, I'm afraid that my child may have some physical or emotional or intellectual limitations that I don't want to have to deal with. I just need to know for sure that I'm going to be a good parent. I need to know for sure I'm going to have a healthy, vibrant child, and that this child is going to grow up and make me proud, yada, yada, yada. And so they need all that certainty, and since they can't get it, then they say, well, I'm just not going to have children at all. I don't want to take that risk, which is certainly their choice, but they rob themselves of the opportunity of being a loving, caring parents and having a family of their own, if that's what they're wanting, though they've cheated themselves out of the potential of having a child that they love dearly for the rest of their lives, just because they can't live with the uncertainty of life.
Yeah, there's a lot of lessons to be learned in that. And there is a certain surrendering to that uncertainty that we must have to change our lives. How many of us get stuck in jobs or situations or whatever experiences, even to the point of taking a vacation because there's too many what ifs, ands, or buts, and we're not willing to have the faith of just surrendering. Well, I've just got to have faith in this, and if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, but we'll see. And that we'll see is really, really hard for a lot of us humans.
It's very, very difficult for a lot, and they just play it safe and they hunker down because they're afraid of failure, of getting disappointed, of getting hurt, or things not working out well, and so they just go into survival mode because they don't trust themselves, for one thing, to be able to cope well if things don't go as they hope they would go. They don't have faith in themselves, but they also don't have faith in other people and circumstances to be able to function well in the world. So they just shut down and don't try much of anything because they won't guarantee success.
Let's go on to number 3, third characteristic of faith. Faith can be the beginning of trust. And I think this is really important. I just love the flow of this book and how one section can flow right into the next. And you say that, we often enter into relationships of any sort thinking it begins with trust, but it can't. You have to have faith first.
Oh, yes, that's exactly true. As we'll get to later when we talk more about trust, is that trust is a very slow process that has to be built over time and experience, but you never can trust anyone, even yourself, right at first. It always has to start with the belief that it is possible, like we talked about earlier, that this person will contribute well to my life and I will contribute to this other person's life, either business or personal. And so you have to have that beginning faith to start off with, and then it gradually and slowly turns into a trusting process. But you have to give yourself and the other person the opportunity to either earn or not earn your trust. And I've heard so many people through my career say, well, I just think that when you get into a relationship, you just should trust someone right off the bat. And that's the biggest mistake you can make. And a lot of people will be offended on the other side of the coin. They'll be offended when they've been into a relationship with someone a little while, and they'll say, well, I want you to trust me. And the other person says, well, I can't trust you right now. We'll just have to give it time. And they feel really offended that they think they should be trusted right off the bat. Well, why don't you trust me? I'm a nice person. They don't understand the principle of earning trust, or they understand it, but they don't want to have to do that. So they want trust without having to earn it. And that's usually coming from a person who is going to be highly manipulative and abusive to that person. If they know about trust and they put the guilt trip on someone and says, well, you should trust me right away, why don't you?
It's like a noose or handcuffs. It's like, I gotcha.
Yeah.
That's
a good metaphor.
I've dealt with some people like that when I was building this house, and you're really at a lot of people's mercy when you're building a house from scratch. And I heard those words, well, do you trust me? It's like, I would panic. It's like, okay, I think so. And I didn't know enough to know the difference. And I found myself feeling like I was in a noose sometimes.
And you think you're the bad guy.
And they think you're the bad guy.
Yeah.
It's a terrible situation to be in.
Yeah, well, you should just trust me automatically.
There's something wrong with you if you don't.
That's right. It's a guilt trip.
Yeah. Well, now that we have talked about this, let's go into the meaning of real trust. And how that's developed. And you say here that it's quite distinct from faith, and it's got its own unique purpose in a relationship. And that you say in the bold letters, I define trust as the belief that someone will do what he says he will do, based on the record of his past behaviors. Let me read that again. I define trust as the belief that someone will do what he says he will do based on the record of his past behaviors.
And that last part of that phrase is the key, is there has to be a track record.
Yeah.
Which is earned over time.
You also say at the end of this definition of trust is the bedrock foundation of all relationships. Without it, there would be no reason or motivation to have interaction with others. A relationship has validity for only one purpose: the mutual and ongoing benefit to both partners. Both partners. So it can't be one-sided here.
Right, exactly.
By definition, then, each person must be able to depend on the other to fulfill his or her part of the agreement. If one or both cannot, the benefits would become unbalanced and thus nullify the whole purpose of the relationship. Obviously, the more dependable and trustworthy both persons are, the more valid and satisfying the relationship becomes. That's invaluable information.
Yeah, and research has shown for decades, when the researchers have been studying the characteristics of healthy versus unhealthy relationships, and that there's a close correlation, the highest correlation in a healthy relationship to that of the trust level that exists between two people. This is the bedrock issue, which makes this one of the most important chapters in this book, because it's the bedrock issue of any relationship, whether business or personal. You have to depend on each other to keep your word.
Mm-hmm. And do, on both sides, do what you say you're going to do most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
But you go into the characteristics of trust, which are very helpful, I think. The first one is trust is earned in units. Why don't you go into that a little bit? I mean, it's pretty straightforward the way you've already started introducing this.
Yeah, this starts expanding what we've already shared about trust, and that is the specific characteristics of it. And when I say it must be earned in units, there's no such thing as total trust, because it's just like having a bank account into which you put money, and $1 or $10 at a time, and there's no such thing as total trust. You begin earning it as if you were putting money in someone's bank account, and each time that you say that you'll do something and you complete that task as you promised, then you have earned 1 unit of trust. You've deposited the money in the bank so that person to trust you. And then the more times you do what you say you will do, you add to that bank account of trust. Like if you say 10 times that you'll do something for someone, and you do it 8 out of 10 times, you've earned 8 units of trust.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people just they're all or nothing thinkers, and so it's just supposed to be total trust from the very beginning, and this is where you get into trouble. So it's a very slow, gradually depositing in the bank account type process that a lot of people get very, very impatient with.
I keep having this idea of the lottery. How many people go and get a ticket just hoping and hoping that they'll win $1 billion so they never have to worry about putting those units in again and it's going to be there. But, they want this perfect life filled with money. And I like what you say. Emotionally, however, many still demand some form of unrealistic perfection from their partner to safeguard themselves from getting too deep into a relationship lest they get betrayed one more time. These people usually go from one relationship to another, seeking that perfect one wherein they can completely trust their partner. Here we come again to that certainty. Mm-hmm. They want a guarantee against pain that is simply not possible in any relationship. Fear, anger, and loneliness are their constant companions. Usually the saddest part of this lifestyle is that these people continue to blame everyone else for their pains, labeling their partners as irresponsible, selfish, and just like everyone else. They don't take any responsibility for their problems, and thus are not likely to seek the help they need.
Yeah, and I point out here in this particular section that trust is a percentage game. Mm-hmm. Is that you cannot expect perfection, anyone to be perfectly trustworthy. I'll use my example earlier, is that if you say that you'll do something for someone 10 times and you do it 8 out of 10, that's pretty good percentage to be trustworthy. But if someone says, no, you've got to never let me down, you've always got to keep your word, and if you do, then you're on my blacklist, I'll never trust you again. They're perfectionists, they're all or nothing thinkers. Mm-hmm. And this is why they don't last long in relationships, because nobody, being human, is going to be perfectly trustworthy. So it's a unit by unit by unit thing, and that takes a lot of pressure off of any relationship. So obviously the more trustworthy you are, the better the relationship, but you cannot expect perfection. It's just one time at one experience at a time.
Well, I like what you say here, that the fact that someone has failed to do what he or she has promised at a particular time does not negate all the previous times when commitments were made and fulfilled. And you say the point is to give people credit for what they do and not take earned credit away from them just because they fail you from time to time. And I also want to bring up the idea that we have to do that for ourselves. We're going to fail. And it's very easy, because we live in a negativity biased culture. It's very easy. I know and to see it all the time. We might be doing 1,000 things good and 2 things come back and we failed, and we think of ourselves as failures, or our partner might think we failed. But I think the most important thing is that we know we're trying.
And that's so important in accomplishing any task. In my practice, I would have conversations with many people who were wanting to, they had come to me to change some behavioral pattern of theirs. It could either be an eating disorder, or they wanted to quit smoking, or they had a compulsion toward alcohol or some other kind of harmful behavior if it's overdone. And or they would start goals and they wouldn't accomplish all their goals. And so they'd come in feeling very, very defeated, like you said, failures. And taking the smoking thing, for instance, someone would come in and say, well, I decided to stop smoking and I was able to stay off of the cigarettes for 3 weeks, and then I, quote, fell off the wagon. And I felt so ashamed of myself, and I just felt like giving up completely. And all I'd say to them is, great, you did 3 weeks without smoking. Start over again. There's always tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And this is how you do anything, is that you go through a lot of failures. They may quit smoking 20 times, and every time it's a success. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't have to be permanent to be successful. And so every day you go without smoking is a day that you're adding to your health. It doesn't matter if you fall off the wagon at that point. I know it's disappointing and you'd like to not do it ever again, but some things you cannot do perfectly. That doesn't mean you're not making progress or having successes. We got to get away from this idea of perfection.
And with that, you don't, like you said, you don't just sweep the whole thing away. So, well, I can't do that. This isn't working. I'm going to move on to the next relationship. I'm going to move on to the next job. That tendency is really strong. And fine, let me just start over again. And I remember, just as a piano teacher, I would deal with this every single day. A student they would be playing beautifully, and it happened in two different ways. They'd be playing beautifully, they'd make a little mistake, they'd bang their fist on their legs and start all the way over 5 pages back. And I go, wait a minute, that was all beautiful. Let's just start right where you are. Mm-hmm. The other way they would do it is, they would get done, they'd have a few mistakes. I'd say, man, that was beautiful. Let's go over and work on these little mistakes you had. And they would just beat themselves up. They would be disappointed in themselves. I can't believe I had these mistakes. I said, this is what you do. You don't realize that the whole piece is bad. You just go to the part that needs work.
Exactly. I used to tell my clients, just to look at someone building a house, for instance. I would use the bricklayer's example. Is that when if you watch a bricklayer lay bricks, they'll lay 4 or 5 rows of bricks, and then they'll lay one wrong, or they see there's one that's cracked or something, and so what they'll do is they chip that brick out, and they put another brick in and keep going and keep building the house. And I'll say, have you ever seen a bricklayer tear down an entire wall because they made a mistake somewhere along the way? No, they chip it out, put in another one, and keep going. Mm-hmm. So it's the same thing when you're earning trust in yourself or someone else, is that you just don't expect perfection. You just fix it and keep going.
I actually had to do that building this house. The whole retaining wall in the back part of my house, the front part of my house, the brick layers, they were in a hurry. They wanted to go to a party. I came back the next day, and the bricklaying was a mess. And the inspector came, and he just dropped his head and he said, "I cannot give you a permit." So I had to gather a couple of guys, and the 3 of us, we didn't tear the whole thing down. We made new concrete, cement, and we went in there and fixed and fixed and fixed and fixed. And there were a lot of mistakes. And it was a great example, as even if there's a lot of mistakes, you don't have to tear it down.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, let's go on to the second characteristic of trust. Trust is specific. Trust building has the process built in a specificity. There are 2 ways in which trust must be related to some specific action. First, trust is not transferable. What does that mean exactly?
Well, you can, here again, trust cannot be assumed to exist just because someone has done something that they have said they would do, and therefore you think, well, I can trust them to do anything I ask them to do. like for instance, I like to use an example that I mentioned earlier to you before we started recording, is that I wanted my wife to trust me to be able to, to fulfill tasks that I would tell her that I would do, like pick up the laundry at the cleaners, or make a bank deposit that I told her I would do. And I wanted to be trusted to do those kinds of things, among many other kinds of things. If I told her I'd wash the dishes, I wanted to be sure that she could trust me to wash the dishes when I said I would. But I did not want to be trusted, nor did she want to trust me to repair a leak in the roof of our house, because I was not obviously a trained roof repair person. And that was not part of our relationship anyway. So she could not trust me to work on the roof of our house and to repair a leak. Another example is that I used to use with my clients, that I would, just to illustrate the point, when they ask me about this particular issue, that not being transferable, I say, well, do you trust me? And often they'd say, oh, sure, you bet. Then you'd say, well, I've just begun taking a course in computer repair. I've had one lesson in computer repair, and I'd like to work on your computer to practice my skills. Would you allow me to fix your computer for you? And they'll start backpedaling real fast and say, no way. So I trust you as my therapist, but I don't trust you as my computer repair person.
So being specific, not just saying, do you trust me?
Yeah.
Yet again, that assumption.
Right. So it's always behaviorally stated. Is like I do that. Sometimes I say, "Do you trust me to operate on you if you have appendicitis?" And they say, no, you're not trained as a doctor." And I say, "Well, that's my point. Is that you cannot transfer trust in one area to trust in all areas of life, and you don't need to anyway. It's not necessary."
Yeah. And then going into being specific, the second factor related to the specificity of trust is clarity. And really stating the whats, the hows, and whens of what you're wanting another person to do so you can trust them. So being clear in the relationship is so important. We hear that, "Do you trust me?" all the time in movies. And boy, does that put somebody else on the spot?
Yeah, it really does. And like I've noted to you before, that so much of I don't know about other languages, but I suspect it would be true in other languages as well. But particularly in English, with which I am more familiar, obviously, most of English words are non-specific. And this is where we really get in trouble when we're trying to communicate, because we're not trained to be specific. We're not exposed to that specificity aspect. Like someone says, well, I need you to be more considerate of me. Well, what does that mean? Or I need you to be supportive of me. I need to trust you to support me in this particular issue. So that's very non-specific. We don't know what that means. So you have to say, well, how do you want me to be supportive? What do you want me to actually do?
And when?
And when to do it, which we'll get over later in the contract negotiation. But this is a good example of so many of our words are so unmeasurable, is that we have to learn how to think behaviorally. If you're going to earn trust, you got to know exactly what this person wants me to do, that they want to trust me to do, or otherwise the communication is a real fast breakdown at that point. Mm-hmm. So when someone says, I really want to trust you to be more patient with me, well, what does that mean? How will you measure patience? And so this goes back to communication skills that we talked about earlier. You have to speak in action terms rather than conceptual terms.
I understand. 3, trust must be confirmed regularly. That's another big one, isn't it?
It is.
People need, because you say here, excuse me just for a second, a little bit down on the 3rd paragraph, the fact is, however, that people do need to earn each other's trust continually. You and your partner must be willing to regularly commit yourselves to actively contribute to the happiness and well-being of the other, and then keep those commitments.
Here again, we have to avoid what someone has called cognitive dysfunction of all or nothing thinking, which is the most common cognitive dysfunction, perfectionism, all or nothing. And so I tell the story of a cartoon I saw many years ago where this husband and wife were sitting back to back in their easy chairs, and obviously the wife had just asked the husband, do you love me? And because the caption in the cartoon says, coming from the husband, he says, look, Ethel, I told you I loved you when I married you. And if I change my mind, I'll let you know.
Oh my gosh.
So she had not heard or felt his love for all those years, but he expected once should be enough. And that's true about trust, is that it is never a finished product. You can't just be trustworthy for a while and then say, okay, now I've earned your trust. Now my job is done and I can wipe my hands of that. And I don't have to keep my word in the future because you should be able to trust me from now on. And that's just not true. It has to be regularly confirmed over and over again as long as the two of you are together.
Yeah. It's a one day at a time deal.
Mm-hmm.
Number 4, trust can be earned but not awarded. And I think what you mean by this is that you can do everything in your power to be trustworthy in a particular situation, but it's a two-way street. The other person does not have to trust you, though.
That's right. It's a choice. You can't make someone trust you. You can earn it, but it's just like I have earned a lot of money in my lifetime that I was never paid.
Right.
And the same with trust. You can earn trust, but you can't make someone trust you. And this problem most often occurs when someone has been really, really hurt, like we referred to previously, in previous relationships or in early childhood, and they've experienced a lot of pain and disappointment and deception and abuse. And so they have decided somewhere along the way, either deliberately or subconsciously, not to trust anybody, just to play it safe. And so you can earn trust, and the other person can say, yeah, I know you've done most of the time what you said you would do, and I really appreciate that, but I don't know what tomorrow holds. You may let me down tomorrow. And so I've just decided I can't trust you, or I just can't trust anybody. And you just have to accept that as a reality, is that you can earn it, but you can't make someone trust you. Now, if that happens over and over again, and that person can't begin to trust you, then you have to question, what am I doing in this relationship?
Right.
That's just like you take a job and you do your job well, but you never get a paycheck from your boss. Sooner or later, you have to ask yourself, why am I continuing to work with this company who doesn't pay me my paycheck? It's the same thing in a relationship. If you earn someone's trust, but you don't get paid and awarded with their trusting you, you have to question whether it's beneficial for you to remain in that relationship.
And on the flip side, if the person is refusing to trust, even though the other person has earned it, then that person who's earning it may just say, "Fine, I'm done with this. Why would I keep trying?" And you give a good example about children when they're doing everything to try to please the parent, but the parent has been brought up with spare the rod, spoil the child. And after a while, they wonder why their child in teenagehood has just gone the other way and getting into trouble and drinking and slipping out at nights, because after a while, they just give up trying. What's the point?
Same principle. Exactly.
Yeah. I think we're going to stop there, and we'll start talking about building the trust process and also contractual agreements, and how we build this like we're building a building, really. We're negotiating with a partner. So I think we've got a really good handle on the difference between faith and trust. Is there anything else you'd like to say about that?
No, I'm looking forward to expanding it into the part B on this particular chapter, and talking about how to actually make it work in real life.
That sounds great.
Thank you so much for listening to our podcast. Again, Dr. Austin's ebook is available on Amazon Kindle, Barnes & Noble, Scribe, Booktopia, Apple Books, Layman's, and Adlibris. We look forward to having you join us for our next podcast.